Yes, I killed her, and I killed my brother. Those were the words Marcus Sullivan said to the police, his voice trembling, his hands still covered in blood, his eyes hollow and distant as if he were looking at something far beyond the interrogation room walls. The two detectives sitting across from him exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. They'd been searching for Marcus for 6 hours, ever since the bodies had been discovered in the Walmart parking lot just after midnight. And now here he was, sitting in their interrogation room at 6 in the morning, confessing to a double homicide without even being asked a single question. But to understand how Marcus Sullivan, a quiet factory worker and devoted father of 2, became a killer, we need to go back. Back to that Thursday night. Back to the moment everything changed. Back to when Marcus walked into Walmart to buy groceries and walked out a different man entirely. Before we dive into this story, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. Seriously, stop what you're doing and subscribe to The Only Witness. This story is going to take you places you never expected, and you don't want to miss a single moment. And while you're at it, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Are you in the United States? What state? What city? Or are you watching from another country? I want to know where my audience is, so comment right now and let me know. All right, let's get into this story. 11:30 p.m., Thursday night. Marcus Sullivan pushed his shopping cart down aisle 9 of the Riverside Walmart Supercenter, a massive store that took up an entire city block in this small Indiana town. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that particular shade of harsh white light that made everything look slightly unreal, slightly sterile. Marcus was exhausted. He'd just finished a 12-hour shift at Reynolds Manufacturing, the automotive parts factory where he'd worked for the past 12 years. His supervisor position paid him $62,000 a year, which wasn't much, but it was enough to keep his family fed, clothed, and housed in their modest 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Street. His blue work uniform still smelled of machine oil and metal shavings, and his steel-toed boots were heavy on his feet as he walked through the nearly empty store. Marcus was 34 years old, married to his high school sweetheart Angela, and father to 2 beautiful children, 10-year-old Emma and 7-year-old Tyler. He was the kind of man who believed in doing the right thing, in working hard, in being loyal to family. He coached Tyler's Little League team on weekends. He helped Emma with her math homework every night. He mowed his elderly neighbor's lawn without being asked. He was, by all accounts, a good man. The kind of man who still opened doors for women, who said please and thank you, who believed that marriage vows meant something sacred and permanent, till death do us part. That's what he'd promised Angela 12 years ago, standing at the altar of First Baptist Church with his younger brother Daniel as his best man. Daniel, his brother. 2 years younger, 32 years old, a mechanic at Patterson's auto shop downtown. Daniel had always been the more charismatic of the 2 brothers, the one with the easy smile and the quick wit. Growing up, Marcus had been the responsible one, while Daniel had been the fun one. But they'd been close, inseparable really. They'd played football together at Riverside High, had double-dated in their 20s, had stood up at each other's weddings. Daniel lived just 3 blocks away with his wife Rebecca, and the 2 couples spent almost every weekend together, barbecuing in backyards, taking the kids to the park, celebrating birthdays and holidays as one big extended family. Marcus trusted Daniel with his life. More than that, he trusted Daniel with his family. Marcus trusted Daniel with his life. More than that, he trusted Daniel with his family, with his wife, with everything that mattered. That trust was about to be shattered in the most brutal way imaginable. Marcus pulled out his phone as he walked, checking the text message Angela had sent him 20 minutes earlier. "Can you stop at Walmart on your way home? We need milk, bread, and get that cereal Emma likes. The one with the marshmallows. Thanks, babe. Love you." Marcus had texted back a thumbs-up emoji and changed his route home to stop at the 24-hour Walmart on Highway 41. He didn't mind. Angela had been home all day with the kids, had made dinner, had probably cleaned the house and done laundry, and 1,000 other things that Marcus sometimes forgot to appreciate. The least he could do was pick up some groceries on his way home. The store was almost empty at this hour. Marcus counted maybe 6 other customers total. There was an elderly woman in a motorized scooter examining soup cans in aisle 3. A young couple, probably college kids from the community college, giggling near the video game section. A tired-looking man in medical scrubs, likely just off shift from the hospital, grabbing what looked like frozen dinners. A few night shift stockers wearing the signature Walmart blue vests, unpacking boxes and restocking shelves with the methodical efficiency of people who'd done this job 1,000 times. And, somewhere in this vast space, though Marcus didn't know it yet, were the two people who were about to destroy his life. Marcus grabbed the cereal first, finding the box with the colourful marshmallows that Emma loved. He smiled slightly, thinking about his daughter's gap-toothed grin, the way she'd bounce into the kitchen tomorrow morning when she saw he'd remembered her favourite cereal. Then he headed toward the dairy section at the back of the store to grab the milk. The Walmart was laid out like most supercenters, with groceries on one side, general merchandise on the other, and everything in between. Marcus's route took him past the clothing section, past racks of discounted jeans and clearance shoes, past the women's intimates department with its rows of bras and underwear and pajamas. And that's when he saw them. At first, it didn't register. His brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing because it made no sense, violated every assumption he had about his life and the people in it. There was a man and a woman standing partially hidden behind a display of discounted sleepwear, their bodies pressed together in an embrace that was decidedly not platonic. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black leather jacket that Marcus recognized immediately because he'd been with Daniel when Daniel bought it last year. The woman had long, dark hair and was wearing jeans and a burgundy sweater. The exact burgundy sweater that Marcus had given Angela for her birthday 2 months ago. The one she'd said was her new favorite. Marcus stopped walking. His shopping cart, forgotten, rolled forward a few feet before bumping gently into a display of folded towels and coming to a stop. His heart, which had been beating normally just seconds ago, suddenly felt like it was trying to punch its way out of his chest. This couldn't be what it looked like. It couldn't be. There had to be another explanation. Maybe it wasn't Angela. Maybe it was someone else wearing a similar sweater. Maybe it wasn't Daniel. Maybe it was someone who just looked like his brother from behind. Maybe Marcus was so tired from his 12-hour shift that he was hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there. But even as these desperate rationalizations ran through his mind, Marcus knew. Deep in his gut, in that primal place where instinct lives and truth cannot be denied, he knew. It was them. It was his wife and his brother. And they were not just standing close together, they were kissing. Deeply, passionately. The kind of kiss that spoke of familiarity and practice, the kind of kiss that doesn't happen once by accident, but has happened many times before. Angela's arms were wrapped around Daniel's neck. Daniel's hands were on Angela's waist, pulling her closer. They were completely absorbed in each other, oblivious to their surroundings, unaware that they were being watched, unaware that Marcus's entire world was crumbling in real time. If you're still watching, I need you to do something for me right now. Subscribe to The Only Witness. Hit that button. And comment below where you're watching from. I want to know if you're watching from New York, California, Texas, Florida, or anywhere else in America or around the world. Drop that comment right now. Let's continue. Marcus stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of the senseless, trying to find some explanation that didn't mean what he thought it meant. But there was no other explanation. His wife was kissing his brother in the women's clothing section of Walmart at 11:45 on a Thursday night. And judging by the comfort and ease of their embrace, this was not the first time. This had been going on for a while. How long? Weeks? Months? Years? How many times had they met like this, in parking lots and stores and God knows where else, while Marcus was working overtime to provide for his family? How many times had they lied to his face? How many family dinners had they sat through, passing the potatoes and making small talk, all while carrying on this betrayal? Marcus felt something break inside him, not metaphorically. He literally felt something in his chest crack and splinter like glass under pressure. It was a physical sensation, sharp and cold and utterly devastating. His hands started to shake, his vision blurred at the edges. He couldn't breathe properly, couldn't get enough air into his lungs. Was this what a heart attack felt like? Was he dying right here in Walmart, killed not by cholesterol or genetics but by the sight of his brother's hands on his wife's body? He didn't remember making the decision to move forward. His feet simply carried him, one step and then another, until he was standing less than 6 feet away from them. They still hadn't noticed him. They were in their own world, completely isolated from reality, from consequences, from the man whose life they were destroying. Marcus's voice, when it finally came, was barely recognizable as his own. It was hoarse, strained, broken. Angela. The single word hung in the air like a bomb about to detonate. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Angela and Daniel jerked apart as if they'd been electrocuted. Angela's face went from flushed and happy to ghostly white in the span of a single second. Her brown eyes, the eyes Marcus had looked into on their wedding day, widened in pure horror. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound coming out. Daniel's reaction was different. There was shock, yes, but also something else. Guilt, certainly. But underneath that, something that looked almost like defiance, like anger at being caught rather than remorse for what he'd been doing. "Marcus," Angela finally breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can explain. This isn't—" But she stopped, because there was no way to finish that sentence. This isn't what it looks like. Except it was exactly what it looked like. This isn't what you think. Except it was precisely what Marcus thought. This didn't mean anything. Except it clearly meant everything. Angela stood there, frozen, her lipstick smeared, her hair slightly mussed, looking like a stranger wearing his wife's face. Marcus turned his gaze to his brother. Daniel met his eyes for a moment, then looked away at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at Marcus. The silence stretched between the three of them, thick and suffocating. Other shoppers were starting to notice something was happening. The elderly woman on the motorized scooter had paused at the end of the aisle, watching with undisguised curiosity. A night shift stocker, a young kid who couldn't have been more than 19, stood holding a box of T-shirts, his eyes wide, clearly sensing the drama but not quite understanding it. "How long?" Marcus asked, his voice still that strange, hollow version of itself. "How long has this been going on?" The question hung in the air. Angela opened her mouth, closed it again. Tears were starting to stream down her face, but she didn't answer. She just stood there crying, as if her tears somehow explained anything, as if they somehow made this better. It was Daniel who finally spoke, his voice low and measured. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year. 180 days. While Marcus had been working double shifts to save money for Emma's braces. While he'd been taking the kids to swimming lessons and soccer practice. While he'd been planning their anniversary trip to Gatlinburg for next month, surprising Angela with reservations at that bed and breakfast she'd always wanted to visit. 6 months of lies, 6 months of deception, 6 months of betrayal so profound, so complete, that Marcus couldn't even begin to process it. 6 months, Marcus repeated, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. He looked at Angela, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "You've been sleeping with my brother for 6 months, and you came home to me every night and pretended everything was fine? You looked me in the eye and told me you loved me. You let me touch you, knowing you'd been with him?" Angela's sobs intensified, her whole body shaking. "I'm sorry," she choked out between gasps. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. It just happened. We didn't plan this. We tried to stop, but..." "But what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice rising now, anger finally breaking through the shock. "You tried to stop, but you just couldn't help yourselves. You were powerless against your feelings. Is that what you're going to tell me?" "It's not like that," Daniel said, stepping forward, putting himself slightly between Marcus and Angela. That single gesture, that protective instinct toward Angela, was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. Marcus saw red, literally saw his vision tint with a crimson haze. His fists clenched at his sides, and it took every ounce of willpower he possessed not to throw a punch right there. "Then what is it like, Danny?" Marcus demanded, using his brother's childhood nickname with deliberate mockery. "Explain it to me. Help me understand how my wife and my brother could betray me like this. Help me understand how you could look me in the eye at Sunday dinner last week and ask me to pass the salt while you were fucking my wife behind my back." The crude language made Angela flinch, but Marcus didn't care. He was done being polite, done being the nice guy, done pretending that civility mattered when his entire life had been revealed as a lie. "Keep your voice down," Daniel said, glancing around at the small audience that had gathered. The elderly woman on the scooter was now openly staring. The young couple had wandered over from electronics, sensing drama. Even the kid stocking shelves had abandoned his work to watch the scene unfold. "Keep my voice down?" Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that held no humor. "Why? Worried about what people will think? Worried about your reputation? You should have thought about that before you started screwing my wife." Angela reached out toward Marcus, her hand extended as if she wanted to touch him, to comfort him, as if she had any right to offer comfort after what she'd done. "Marcus, please. Can we go somewhere private? Can we talk about this at home? Not here. Not like this. Think about the kids." The mention of Emma and Tyler was like a knife to the gut. The kids. His children. Who were home right now, sleeping peacefully in their beds, completely unaware that their family was disintegrating. What would he tell them? How could he explain that Mommy and Uncle Daniel had destroyed everything? "You should have thought about the kids before you did this," Marcus said, his voice dropping back to that eerie calm. "You should have thought about them before you decided to blow up their family. Don't you dare use our children as a shield now." He looked at Daniel, who had the decency to at least look uncomfortable. "You were my brother, my best friend. When Dad died, you leaned on me, and I held you up. When you needed money for your wedding, I gave it to you without hesitation. I trusted you with everything. And this is how you repay me?" Daniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Marcus thought his brother might actually apologize, might actually show genuine remorse. But instead, Daniel said, "I didn't do this to hurt you, Marcus. I love her. I'm in love with her. We're in love." Those words, more than anything else that had been said, more than the initial discovery, more than the confession of 6 months of betrayal, those words destroyed Marcus completely. His brother loved his wife. His brother was in love with his wife. This wasn't just sex. This wasn't just physical. This was emotional. This was real. They had feelings for each other. They had built something together while simultaneously destroying Marcus's life. Marcus took a step back, needing distance, needing space. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. His hands were shaking so violently he had to shove them in his pockets to hide it. "You're in love," he said flatly. "That's supposed to make this better. That's supposed to make it okay that you destroyed my marriage, my family, my life. Because you're in love?" "No," Angela said quickly, stepping around Daniel. "That's not what he means. Marcus, please, just listen." "I don't want to hear it," Marcus cut her off. "I don't want to hear any excuses or explanations or justifications. You made your choice, you both did, and now I'm making mine." He pulled his phone from his pocket with shaking hands and opened the text thread with Angela. He typed quickly, his vision still blurred with tears he refused to let fall. "I know about you and Daniel. Don't come to my mother's house. I'll have someone pack your things." He hit send before Angela could see what he was typing, then immediately blocked her number. He did the same with Daniel's number. Then he opened his contacts and found his lawyer, Jim Henderson, a guy he played poker with once a month. He sent Jim a text at nearly midnight on a Thursday. "Need to file for divorce immediately. Wife cheating with my brother. Can you help?" Jim responded within seconds despite the late hour. "Jesus. Yes. Call me first thing in the morning." Marcus pocketed his phone and looked at Angela and Daniel one last time. They were standing close together, Daniel's hand on Angela's shoulder, and the sight of them as a unit, as a couple, made Marcus's stomach turn. "I want a divorce," he said clearly. "I'll be filing papers tomorrow. You can have the house, Angela. I don't want it. I don't want anything that reminds me of you. I'll figure out custody arrangements through lawyers. Don't contact me. Don't try to explain. Don't apologize. We're done. And you," he turned to Daniel. You're not my brother anymore. As far as I'm concerned, Daniel Sullivan died tonight. Before we continue, I need you to subscribe to The Only Witness right now if you haven't already. Hit that button. This story is about to take a dark turn, and you need to be subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. And comment below where you're watching from. Are you watching from the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, South, or somewhere outside the United States? Let me know right now in the comments. All right, let's get back to Marcus. Marcus turned and walked away, leaving his abandoned shopping cart, leaving his wife and brother standing there among the discount clothing racks. He could hear Angela calling after him, could hear her footsteps as she started to follow. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. If he stopped, if he turned around, if he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had just happened, he would break completely, and he couldn't afford to break. Not yet. Not here. He pushed through the automatic doors and out into the parking lot. The October night air was cold, biting against his face, and he welcomed it. He needed something sharp, something real, something to cut through the numbness that was trying to settle over him. He walked to his truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that had seen better days, but still ran reliably. He'd bought it used when Emma was born, and it had over 200,000 miles on it now. He fumbled with his keys, his hands still shaking, and climbed inside. He sat there in the darkness of the cab, staring at nothing, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to figure out what to do next. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls from Angela's number, which he'd blocked, going straight to voicemail. Then calls started coming from Daniel's phone, also blocked. Then from Daniel's wife, Rebecca. Marcus answered that one. "Marcus," Rebecca said, her voice urgent and confused. "Daniel just called me. He said something happened at Walmart. He said you found out about him and Angela." "Marcus, what the hell is going on? Is it true? Has my husband been having an affair with your wife?" Marcus closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the headrest. Rebecca. He'd forgotten about Rebecca in all of this. She was collateral damage too, another victim of Daniel and Angela's selfishness. "It's true," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "I caught them together tonight. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm so sorry." Rebecca was silent for a long moment, and Marcus could hear her breathing, could hear her processing this information. Then she said, very quietly, "How long?" "They said 6 months," Marcus told her, "but who knows if that's even the truth. Could be longer." Rebecca let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, bitter and broken. 6 months. He's been lying to me for 6 months, coming home to me every night, sleeping in our bed, telling me he loved me, all while he was with your wife. Oh God, Marcus, what are we going to do?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Beyond that, I have no idea." They talked for a few more minutes, two devastated spouses trying to make sense of the senseless, trying to comfort each other when neither of them had any comfort to give. Finally, Rebecca said she needed to go, needed to think, needed to figure out her next move. Marcus ended the call and sat alone in the silence of his truck. His phone rang again. This time it was his mother, Eleanor Sullivan. Of course Daniel had called their mother, of course he had. Probably spinning some version of events that made him look less like a betrayer and more like a victim of circumstance. Marcus answered. "Mom." "Marcus, honey, what's happening? Daniel just called me in hysterics. He said you found out about him and Angela. He said you threatened him. Marcus, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me my boys haven't destroyed each other like this." Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. "It's true, Mom, all of it. I caught them together at Walmart. They've been having an affair for 6 months. Maybe longer." His mother was silent for so long that Marcus thought the call had dropped. Then she said very quietly, "Oh, Marcus. Oh, my sweet boy. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known, I would have stopped it. I would have told you immediately." "I know, Mom," Marcus said. He believed her. Eleanor Sullivan was a lot of things, but she wasn't a liar, and she wasn't someone who would condone infidelity. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Where are you right now? Are you okay?" "I'm in the Walmart parking lot," Marcus said. "I'm not okay, but I will be, eventually. I need to figure some things out. Can you do me a favor? Can you call your friend who runs that motel on Route 9? I need a place to stay tonight. I can't go home. Not yet. His mother agreed immediately, promising to set it up and text him the details. They talked for a few more minutes, his mother offering comfort that Marcus couldn't quite absorb, making suggestions about lawyers and counselors that Marcus couldn't quite process. Finally, he promised to call her in the morning and ended the call. Marcus sat in his truck for another hour, maybe longer. Time had lost all meaning. Cars came and went in the parking lot. The Walmart stayed open, its fluorescent lights blazing, completely indifferent to the human drama that had just unfolded inside. Eventually, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. She'd gotten him a room at the Riverside Motor Lodge, room 114, paid for a week, no questions asked. Marcus started his truck and pulled out of the parking lot, but instead of heading to the motel, he found himself driving with no destination in mind. He drove through the empty streets of Riverside, past darkened houses where families slept peacefully, unaware of the tragedy playing out in their town. He drove past the elementary school where Emma and Tyler went, past the park where he'd taught them to ride bikes, past First Baptist Church where he'd married Angela 12 years ago. Every place in this town held a memory, and every memory now felt tainted, poisoned by the knowledge of what had been happening behind his back. He drove for an hour, maybe two, finally ending up at Riverside Lake, a small man-made reservoir on the edge of town where he and Daniel used to fish when they were kids. He parked near the shore and got out, walking down to the water's edge. The moon was nearly full, reflecting off the dark water in a silvery path. It should have been beautiful. It should have been peaceful. But all Marcus felt was pain. Crushing, overwhelming, suffocating pain that made it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to exist. He thought about Angela, about their 12 years together. Had any of it been real? Had she ever truly loved him? Or had he just been convenient, safe, boring? He thought about all the times she'd told him she loved him in the last 6 months, all the times they'd been intimate, all the family dinners and bedtime routines and ordinary moments of married life. All of it had been a lie. She'd been thinking about Daniel, she'd been comparing them. She'd been wishing Marcus was someone else. And Daniel, Daniel, his brother, his best friend, the person he'd trusted more than anyone except Angela. They'd grown up in the same house, shared the same bedroom until Daniel was 16 and moved to the basement. They'd fought sometimes, the way brothers do, but they'd always had each other's backs. When Marcus was laid off from his first job and couldn't make rent, Daniel had lent him $2,000 without hesitation. When Daniel's car broke down senior year, Marcus had driven him to school every day for 3 months. When their father had a heart attack and died 5 years ago, they'd held each other and cried and promised to always be there for each other. And this was how Daniel kept that promise: by sleeping with his wife, by destroying his family, by betraying every bond of brotherhood and loyalty and trust. Marcus felt something shift inside him as he stood there on the shore of the lake. The pain didn't go away, didn't lessen, but it changed. It hardened. It crystallized into something colder, something darker, something that felt dangerously close to hate. He'd never hated anyone in his life. He'd been raised to believe that hate was a sin, that you should love your enemies and pray for those who persecuted you. But standing there in the moonlight, Marcus realized that he'd never had a real enemy before. He'd never experienced real persecution. Not like this. Not betrayal so complete and so cruel that it rewrote his entire history, made him question every good memory, every happy moment. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Marcus, it's Angela. I'm texting from a friend's phone since you blocked me. Please call me. We need to talk about the kids. They're asking where you are. Emma is crying. Tyler doesn't understand. Please come home. I know you're angry, but please don't do this to our children." Marcus stared at the text for a long moment. The kids, Emma and Tyler. They were probably awake now, despite it being after 2 in the morning. They'd probably heard Angela come home crying. They were probably scared and confused, and they deserved better than to be caught in the middle of this nightmare. But Marcus couldn't face them. Not yet. Not until he had some kind of plan, some kind of answer to the million questions they were going to ask. He typed back, Tell them I love them and I'll see them soon. Tell them nothing else. Don't tell them why I'm not there. Don't make excuses. Don't lie to them any more than you already have. I'll figure out how to talk to them when I'm ready." He hit send and then blocked that number too. Then he got back in his truck and drove to the Riverside Motor Lodge. Room 114 was exactly what he expected. A basic room with a queen bed, a small TV, a bathroom that smelled of industrial cleaner. But it was clean, and it was private, and it was somewhere Marcus could finally let himself break. And break he did. The moment the door closed behind him, the moment he was truly alone for the first time since discovering the affair, Marcus fell apart. He sank to the floor with his back against the door and sobbed. Great, gasping, ugly sobs that shook his entire body. He cried for his marriage, for his family, for his brother, for the life he'd thought he had that had turned out to be nothing but an illusion. He cried until there were no tears left, until his throat was raw and his eyes were swollen and his chest ached from the force of it. And when the tears finally stopped, when the storm of emotion finally passed, what was left behind was something cold and hard and frightening. Marcus pulled himself off the floor and looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was pale, and he looked 10 years older than he had this morning. But there was something else in his reflection too, something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. A hardness, a determination. A man who had been broken and was now deciding what to do with the pieces. He splashed water on his face, dried off with a thin motel towel and sat down on the edge of the bed. His phone showed dozens of missed calls and texts. From Angela, from Daniel, from Rebecca, from his mother. From friends who had already heard the news because, in a small town like Riverside, gossip travelled at the speed of light. Marcus ignored all of them. Instead, he opened his truck's glove compartment remotely using his phone's app. Inside that glove compartment was something Marcus had never thought he'd need to use. His father's old revolver, a .357 Magnum that had been given to Marcus after his father died. It was registered, legal, kept for home protection that had never been necessary. Until now. Marcus sat on that motel bed, staring at his phone, thinking about that gun sitting in his truck just 50 feet away, thinking about how easy it would be, thinking about how much pain he was in and how there was only one guaranteed way to make it stop. But then he thought about Emma and Tyler, about how they'd already lost the family they knew, about how losing their father to suicide would destroy them completely. He couldn't do that to them. No matter how much he was hurting, no matter how impossible moving forward seemed, he couldn't do that to his kids. So Marcus made a different decision. He would survive this. He would file for divorce. He would fight for custody of his children. He would rebuild his life from the ashes of his marriage. He would endure because that's what fathers do. They endure for their children. If you're still watching this story, I need you to subscribe to The Only Witness right now. This story isn't over yet. In fact, we're just getting to the most intense part. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. United States? Which state? Outside the US? Let me know right now. Okay, let's continue because what happens next changes everything. Marcus woke up Friday morning after maybe 2 hours of fitful sleep. His first thought was that maybe it had all been a nightmare. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe he'd wake up in his own bed with Angela beside him, and everything would be normal. But no. He was in a motel room. His phone was full of frantic messages, and the crushing weight on his chest confirmed that it had all been horrifyingly real. He showered, put on the same clothes from yesterday because he had nothing else, and drove to his house to pack a bag. It was 7 in the morning. The kids would be getting ready for school. He needed to see them. Needed to reassure them that he was okay even though he wasn't. But when Marcus pulled into his driveway, he saw Daniel's truck parked on the street, his brother's truck, at his house, at 7 in the morning. Marcus sat in his own truck, staring at that vehicle, feeling rage build in his chest like a physical thing. Daniel was inside his house, with Angela, with his children, acting like he had any right to be there, like he had any claim to Marcus's family. Marcus got out of his truck and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. He pushed it open and walked inside. The scene that greeted him made his blood run cold. Emma and Tyler were sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast. Angela was at the stove making pancakes, and Daniel was sitting at the table with the kids, helping Tyler cut his pancake, laughing at something Emma said, playing father to Marcus's children. The domesticity of it, the casual normalcy, was more painful than anything that had happened last night. This was what they wanted. This was the family they'd been building in secret. Angela, Daniel, Emma, and Tyler. A ready-made family with Marcus edited out of the picture. "Get out," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. Everyone froze. Emma and Tyler's heads whipped around, their faces lighting up when they saw their father. "Daddy!" They both jumped up from the table and ran to him. Marcus caught them, hugged them fiercely, breathing in the smell of their shampoo and feeling his heart break all over again. These were his children, his babies, and Daniel wanted to take them from him. "Hey guys," Marcus said, forcing his voice to sound normal. "How are you doing?" "Mommy said you had to work late," Emma said. "She said you stayed at Grandma's house. Are you okay, Daddy? Mommy was crying last night." Marcus looked over his children's heads at Angela, who had gone pale, and at Daniel, who was standing now looking uncomfortable but also defiant. "I'm okay, sweetheart," Marcus lied to his daughter. "Everything's okay. Why don't you guys go finish your breakfast? I need to talk to Mommy and Uncle Daniel for a minute." The kids, sensing adult tension even if they didn't understand it, quietly went back to their seats. Marcus walked into the living room, and Angela and Daniel followed. "I told you not to contact me," Marcus said to Angela. "And you," he turned to Daniel, "what the hell are you doing in my house?" "I came to check on Angela," Daniel said. "She was upset. She needed someone to talk to." "She has friends for that," Marcus snapped. "She doesn't need her affair partner playing house with my kids." "Keep your voice down," Angela hissed, glancing nervously toward the kitchen where Emma and Tyler were. "The kids don't know anything. Let's keep it that way." "Oh, now you're worried about the kids," Marcus said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Where was that concern for the last 6 months while you were sleeping with my brother?" Daniel stepped forward, positioning himself between Marcus and Angela again, and that protective gesture, that same damn gesture from last night, pushed Marcus past his breaking point. "Move," Marcus said quietly, dangerously. "Move, or I swear to God, Daniel, I will put you through that wall." "You need to calm down," Daniel said, but there was an edge to his voice now too. "This isn't helping anyone. We need to sit down like adults and figure this out." "Figure this out," Marcus repeated, his voice rising despite his efforts to control it. "There's nothing to figure out. You destroyed my marriage. You betrayed me. There's no conversation to be had here. I want you out of my house, and I want you to stay away from my family." "It's my family too now," Daniel said, and those words, that claim of ownership over Angela and the kids, was the final straw. Marcus didn't remember making the decision to swing. His fist just flew, connecting with Daniel's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed through the living room. Daniel stumbled backward, crashing into the coffee table, sending magazines and remote controls flying. Angela screamed. From the kitchen, Marcus could hear Emma and Tyler start crying. Daniel recovered quickly, wiping blood from his split lip, and charged at Marcus. The two brothers collided like freight trains, years of brotherhood and loyalty and love transformed in an instant into pure rage. They crashed into the entertainment center, shattering the glass door. They rolled across the floor, fists flying, each punch carrying 12 years of trust now broken. Marcus was bigger, but Daniel was faster. They were evenly matched, both fueled by anger and pain, and something primal that had nothing to do with Angela and everything to do with betrayal at its most fundamental level. Angela was screaming for them to stop, trying to pull them apart, but they were beyond hearing her. Emma and Tyler ran into the room, crying, begging their daddy and uncle to stop fighting, and it was their voices, those small terrified voices, that finally broke through the red haze. Marcus and Daniel separated, both breathing hard, both bleeding. Marcus had a cut above his eye. Daniel's nose was bleeding, possibly broken. They stood there staring at each other, and Marcus saw something in his brother's eyes that he'd never seen before. Not just guilt, not just remorse, but satisfaction. Daniel was satisfied. He'd won. He'd gotten the woman, and now he was positioning himself to get the family too. "You need to leave," Angela said to Marcus, her voice shaking. "You're scaring the children. You need to get out." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "I need to leave? This is my house, Angela. These are my children. He's the one who needs to leave." "You just attacked him," Angela said. "You're being violent and irrational. I think it's best if you go cool off somewhere. We can talk when you're calmer." Marcus looked at his wife, really looked at her, and realized she'd already made her choice. She'd chosen Daniel. Fully. Completely. She was already building a new life, a new family, and Marcus was nothing but an obstacle to be removed. He looked at Emma and Tyler, both crying, both scared, both looking at him like he was a monster. And maybe he was. Maybe he'd become something monstrous in the last 12 hours. He'd certainly never felt more capable of violence than he did in that moment. "Okay," Marcus said quietly, his voice eerily calm again. "Okay. I'll go. But this isn't over. Not even close." He walked to the bedroom, grabbed some clothes and threw them in a duffel bag. He grabbed his laptop, some important documents, family photos from the dresser that he couldn't bear to leave behind. The whole time, Angela followed him, talking about lawyers and mediation and what was best for the kids, as if she had any moral authority to discuss what was best for anyone. Marcus zipped up his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and walked back to the living room. Daniel was on the couch with an ice pack on his face. Emma and Tyler were sitting on either side of him, and the sight of his children seeking comfort from the man who'd destroyed their family was almost more than Marcus could bear. He knelt down in front of his kids. "I love you both so much," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "More than anything in the world. I'm sorry you saw that. Daddy made a mistake, but I promise you everything is going to be okay. I'll see you very soon." "Where are you going?" Tyler asked, his 7-year-old face streaked with tears. "Are you leaving us?" "No, buddy," Marcus said, pulling both kids into a tight hug. "I'm not leaving you. I'm just staying somewhere else for a little while. But I'll see you all the time. I promise." He kissed both their heads, stood up and walked out of the house without looking back at Angela or Daniel. "Before we get to what happens next, I need you to do something. Subscribe to The Only Witness right now. We're getting to the critical part of this story and you don't want to miss it. And comment below where you're watching from. I want to hear from every single one of you. What state are you in? What country? Drop that comment right now. Let's continue. Marcus drove back to the motel in a daze. His knuckles were split and bleeding. His eye was swelling shut. His ribs ached where Daniel had landed several good punches. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. He'd just been kicked out of his own house by his cheating wife so she could play family with his brother and his children. He pulled into the motel parking lot and sat in his truck with the engine running, trying to figure out what to do next. His phone rang. It was Jim Henderson, his lawyer. Marcus answered. "Jim. Marcus, I got your text from last night. Jesus Christ, man, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "I'm not okay. I need to file for divorce immediately, today if possible. And I need to fight for full custody of my kids." "Okay," Jim said, his voice shifting to professional mode. "I can do that. I'll need you to come to my office this afternoon. We'll start the paperwork. But Marcus, I have to ask, is there any chance of reconciliation? Any chance you and Angela can work through this?" "No," Marcus said flatly. "She's already moved my brother into the house. They're playing family with my kids. There's no working through this, Jim. I want a divorce and I want custody and I want to make sure Daniel Sullivan is never allowed around my children unsupervised." Jim was silent for a moment. "That's going to be tough, Marcus. He's their uncle. He's family. Unless you can prove he's a danger to them." "He is a danger to them," Marcus interrupted. "He's a liar and a manipulator who broke up their family. I don't want him anywhere near Emma and Tyler." They talked for another 20 minutes, Jim explaining the divorce process, the custody battle that was coming, The reality that in Indiana, unless Angela was proven unfit, she'd likely get at least 50% custody. Marcus listened, feeling his options narrow, feeling control of his life slip further away. He hung up and sat in the truck cab, staring at nothing. That's when the thought first occurred to him. The thought he'd pushed away last night. The thought that had been lurking in the back of his mind like a shadow, waiting for the right moment to emerge. What if they were just gone? What if Angela and Daniel simply didn't exist anymore? Then Emma and Tyler would be his, completely his. There would be no custody battle, no shared parenting, no having to hand his kids over to the woman who'd betrayed him and the man who'd helped her do it. Marcus shook his head, trying to dislodge the thought. That was crazy. That was murder. He wasn't a killer. He was a good man, a decent man, a man who'd never hurt anyone in his life except for the fight this morning. But the thought wouldn't go away. It took root in his mind and began to grow, fed by rage and pain and a sense of injustice so profound that it demanded retribution. Marcus got out of his truck and went into his motel room. He paced back and forth, arguing with himself, trying to talk himself out of what he was increasingly certain he was going to do. The rational part of his brain, the part that still functioned despite the trauma, told him this was insane. He'd go to prison for the rest of his life. His children would grow up without a father, his mother would be devastated, his whole life would be over. But the other part, the part that had been wounded so deeply that it could never fully heal, whispered that his life was already over. The Marcus Sullivan who'd woken up yesterday morning was dead. That man, the trusting husband and loyal brother, no longer existed. What was left was something new, something darker, something capable of things the old Marcus never would have considered. Marcus sat down on the motel bed and thought about his options. He could go through with the divorce, fight for custody, and spend the next 10 years watching his children bond with Daniel, watching his brother take his place as Emma and Tyler's father figure. He could watch Daniel teach Tyler to throw a baseball, walk Emma down the aisle at her wedding, hold Marcus's grandchildren someday. He could live with that knowledge, with that pain every single day for the rest of his life. Or he could end it. He could make sure Angela and Daniel never got to build their happy life together. Never got to play family with his children, never got to rewrite history as if Marcus had never existed. He opened his phone and pulled up Facebook, scrolling through Angela's posts from the last 6 months. There she was, smiling at Emma's piano recital. There she was at the county fair with Tyler. There was a family photo from their trip to the Indiana Dunes in August, Marcus with his arm around Angela, both kids grinning at the camera. He zoomed in on Angela's face in that photo. She'd been sleeping with Daniel when this was taken. She'd been carrying on her affair while posing for happy family photos. The duplicity of it, the sheer audacity, made Marcus's blood boil. He scrolled further and found photos of Daniel. There was one from 4th of July, Daniel at the Sullivan family barbecue, flipping burgers on Marcus's grill, beer in hand, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world, like he wasn't actively destroying his brother's life. Marcus stared at that photo for a long time. Then he closed Facebook and opened his truck's app again. The gun was still in the glove compartment. He'd never used it, never even loaded it. But he knew how. His father had taught him when he was 16. Gun safety, his father had called it. Every man should know how to handle a firearm responsibly. Marcus stood up and walked out to his truck. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out the revolver. It was heavy, cold, real. He took it back to his motel room and sat on the bed holding it. This was real. This was happening. He was actually considering murder. Double murder. He should call someone. His mother, his pastor, a therapist. Anyone who could talk him out of this. But he didn't. Because deep down, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge, Marcus had already made his decision. The old Marcus, the good man, the decent man, was dead. And what was left had only one purpose: retribution. Friday afternoon, Marcus sat in Jim Henderson's office and went through the motions of filing for divorce. He signed papers, answered questions, nodded in the right places. But his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about logistics, about how to make this happen, about how to get away with it. Jim kept looking at him strangely, asking if he was okay, if he needed a break. Marcus assured him he was fine, that he was just processing everything. That was true in a way. He was processing, just not in the way Jim thought. That evening, Marcus drove past his house. Daniel's truck was still there. He'd moved in completely then, taken over Marcus's life without hesitation or remorse. Marcus drove past 3 times, each time feeling his resolve harden. He spent Friday night in the motel room, cleaning the gun, loading it, planning. He knew Angela's schedule. She grocery shopped every Friday night at Walmart because it was less crowded than the weekends. She usually went around 9 or 10 after putting the kids to bed. And lately, based on the texts he'd seen on her phone when she'd left it lying around, she'd been meeting someone during these late-night shopping trips. Daniel. They'd been meeting at Walmart, probably in the parking lot, stealing moments together while Marcus was at home with the kids or at work, completely oblivious. The irony that Walmart, where he'd discovered their affair, would also be where he'd end it, wasn't lost on Marcus. Saturday morning, Marcus called his mother and asked if Emma and Tyler could spend the night with her. Eleanor, worried about her son and desperate to help, agreed immediately. She picked the kids up at noon, giving Marcus a long hug and telling him everything would be okay. Marcus hugged her back and lied, telling her he just needed some time to process everything. That afternoon, Marcus watched from his truck as Daniel left the house. Good. He wanted them separated for now. He needed to know where they'd be and when they'd be together. He called Angela from a burner phone he'd bought at a gas station. "Hello?" Angela answered, not recognizing the number. "It's me," Marcus said. "Don't hang up. I want to talk, not about us, about the kids. We need to figure out custody arrangements that work for everyone." "Oh," Angela said, sounding relieved. "Okay, yes, we do need to talk about that. When do you want to meet?" "Not in person," Marcus said. "I'm not ready for that. But I need to know your schedule. When are you free this week?" They talked for 10 minutes, Angela outlining her week, mentioning casually that she usually did grocery shopping Friday nights. Marcus asked what time, where, acting like he was just making conversation. She told him. 9:30, Walmart on Highway 41, the same Walmart where this had all started. "Maybe I'll do my shopping then too," Marcus said casually. "Not together, but it might be good to run into each other in a neutral place. Start normalizing things for when we have to co-parent." Angela agreed, saying that sounded like a good idea, that they needed to be mature about this for the kids' sake. Marcus hung up and sat in his motel room, the gun on the bed beside him, and waited for Friday. The week crawled by. Marcus went through the motions of living. He went to work, though he could barely focus. He visited Emma and Tyler at his mother's house, playing with them, reading them stories, memorizing their faces because he knew that after Friday, everything would change. He met with Jim Henderson twice more, going over divorce paperwork, custody plans, financial settlements. Jim kept commenting on how calm Marcus seemed, how well he was handling everything. Marcus just smiled and nodded. He was calm, calmer than he'd been in days. Because he had a plan, he had a purpose. He knew what he was going to do. Thursday night, Marcus barely slept. He lay in the motel bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what tomorrow would bring. He thought about Emma and Tyler, about how they'd grow up without a mother, how Marcus would have to explain it someday. He thought about his own mother, about how she'd lose one son to prison and another to death. He thought about prison, about spending the rest of his life behind bars. But mostly he thought about Angela and Daniel, about how they'd betrayed him, about how they deserved what was coming. Friday morning, Marcus woke up at dawn. He showered, shaved, put on clean clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. His eyes were cold, empty. He looked like a stranger. He spent the day preparing. He wrote a letter to his children, trying to explain the unexplainable, trying to help them understand why their father had done what he was about to do. He wrote letters to his mother, to Jim Henderson, to his boss at the factory. He put them all in envelopes and left them on the motel dresser where police would find them later. At 8 p.m., Marcus got in his truck and drove to Walmart. He parked in a spot with a clear view of the entrance, but far enough away that he wouldn't be immediately noticed. He put the gun in his jacket pocket. He waited. 9:15, Angela's car pulled into the parking lot. Marcus watched her park, get out, adjust her purse on her shoulder. She was wearing jeans and that burgundy sweater, the one he'd bought her for her birthday, the one she'd been wearing when he caught them together. She walked into the store alone. 9:35, Daniel's truck pulled into the parking lot. He parked near Angela's car. Marcus watched his brother get out, look around to make sure no one was watching, then walk into the store. Marcus waited 5 minutes, then followed. He knew where they'd be. The clothing section, their usual meeting spot. He walked through the automatic doors, past the greeters, into the vast expanse of the Walmart supercenter. His hand was in his pocket, wrapped around the gun. His heart was pounding, but his mind was clear. He found them exactly where he expected. Aisle 9, near the women's clothing. They were standing close together, talking in low voices, Angela laughing at something Daniel said. Marcus watched them for a moment, feeling nothing. No anger, no pain, no hesitation, just cold, absolute certainty. He walked toward them, his footsteps silent on the linoleum floor. They didn't see him until he was standing right in front of them. Angela gasped. Daniel's eyes widened. "Marcus," Angela said, "what are you doing here?" Marcus pulled the gun from his pocket. For a fraction of a second there was silence. Then Angela screamed. Daniel lunged forward, trying to grab the gun, trying to protect Angela one last time. Marcus pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off the high ceilings. Daniel fell backward, clutching his chest, blood already spreading across his shirt. Angela was still screaming, backing away, her hands up in a defensive gesture. Marcus turned the gun on her. "I loved you," he said quietly. Then he pulled the trigger again. Angela crumpled to the floor next to Daniel. Marcus stood there for a moment, looking at what he'd done. 2 people dead because of betrayal, because of lies, because of choices that had seemed so easy to them but had destroyed everything for Marcus. Around him, chaos erupted. People were screaming, running, diving behind displays. Marcus could hear sirens in the distance, already responding. He walked calmly toward the exit, still holding the gun. He made it to the parking lot before the first police car arrived, lights flashing, blocking his path. Marcus stopped walking. He dropped the gun on the pavement. He raised his hands. Officers swarmed him, shouting commands, forcing him to the ground, cuffing his hands behind his back. Marcus didn't resist. He'd known this was how it would end. He'd planned for it. They dragged him to a police car, shoved him in the back seat. As they drove to the station, Marcus looked out the window at the Walmart, at the people streaming out in panic, at the crime scene tape already going up. He'd done it. It was over. Angela and Daniel would never get their happy ending, would never build a life together, would never take his children from him. At the police station, they put Marcus in an interrogation room. 2 detectives came in, sat down across from him, and before they could even introduce themselves, before they could read him his Miranda rights, Marcus spoke. "Yes, I killed her and I killed my brother." His voice was trembling but clear. The detectives exchanged glances. One of them leaned forward. "Marcus Sullivan, you have the right to remain silent." "I don't want to remain silent," Marcus interrupted. "I want to confess. I want to tell you everything. I killed Angela Sullivan and Daniel Sullivan at approximately 9:40 p.m. tonight at the Walmart on Highway 41. I shot them both. I planned it. I knew what I was doing." The detectives tried to follow protocol, tried to advise Marcus to get a lawyer, but Marcus kept talking. He told them everything, about discovering the affair, about the 6 months of betrayal, about being kicked out of his own house, about watching his brother take over his family, about making the decision to end it permanently. He talked for 2 hours straight, confessing to premeditated double murder, providing every detail they could possibly need for a conviction. When he was finally done, when he'd told them everything, one of the detectives asked, "Do you regret it?" Marcus thought about that question for a long moment. Then he said, "No, they destroyed my life. They deserved what they got. My only regret is that my children will grow up without a mother. But at least they won't grow up thinking that betrayal is acceptable." At least they won't grow up watching the people who hurt me get rewarded for it." The detectives left the room. Marcus sat alone in the interrogation room, exhausted but somehow at peace. He'd done what he'd set out to do. He'd made sure Angela and Daniel paid for their betrayal, and yes, he'd pay too. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison. He'd lose his children. He'd lose everything. But Angela and Daniel had lost more. They'd lost their lives. They'd lost their future. They'd lost their chance to be happy together. And for Marcus, sitting in that interrogation room with blood on his hands and murder in his heart, that felt like justice. Before we end this story, I need you to subscribe to The Only Witness one final time. If you haven't hit that button yet, do it now. We bring you stories like this that make you think, that make you feel, that show you the darkest corners of human nature. And comment below one last time where you're watching from. I want to hear from all of you, every state, every country. Let me know right now. Marcus Sullivan was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He pleaded guilty at his arraignment, refusing to let his court-appointed attorney mount any kind of defense. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's own confession, given freely and repeatedly, sealed his fate. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with a verdict, guilty on both counts. The judge sentenced Marcus to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus showed no emotion when the sentence was read. He simply nodded as if confirming something he'd always known. Emma and Tyler Sullivan became orphans in the span of a single night. Their mother was dead, murdered by their father. Their uncle, who they'd loved and trusted, was dead too. Their father was in prison for life. They went to live with their grandmother, Eleanor Sullivan, who suddenly found herself raising 2 traumatized children while grieving for one son and grappling with the horror of what her other son had done. The children underwent therapy, lots of it, trying to process the trauma of what had happened. Emma, at 10 years old, understood more than Tyler did. She understood that her mother had done something wrong, something that had hurt her father so badly that he'd snapped, but she also understood that what her father did was wrong too. That killing is never the answer, no matter how hurt you are. Tyler, at 7, just knew that his mommy was gone, his Uncle Danny was gone, and his daddy was in a place called prison that he couldn't leave. He had nightmares every night for months. He struggled in school. He withdrew from his friends. It took years of therapy for him to begin to process what had happened to his family. Marcus wrote letters to his children from prison. Long letters trying to explain, trying to help them understand. Eleanor debated whether to give the children these letters. Eventually she decided they should have them, but not until they were older, not until they could handle the weight of their father's words. In prison, Marcus became a model inmate. He didn't cause trouble, he followed all the rules. He kept to himself mostly, reading books, working in the prison library, trying to find some kind of peace in the life he'd chosen. Other inmates knew his story. Everyone in prison knows everyone's story eventually. Some thought he was a hero, that he'd done what any real man would do when betrayed like that. Others thought he was a monster who'd murdered the mother of his children. Marcus didn't care what anyone thought. He knew what he was. He was a man who'd been broken and had broken others in return. Years passed. Emma and Tyler grew up. Emma became a social worker, dedicating her life to helping children from broken homes, perhaps trying to make sense of her own broken childhood. Tyler became a therapist, specializing in trauma, trying to understand what had happened to his family and help others who'd experienced similar devastation. Neither of them ever visited their father in prison. Eleanor asked them several times if they wanted to, but both declined. The wound was too deep. The betrayal, both their mother's and their father's, was too profound. Marcus understood. He didn't blame them. He'd made his choice, and this was the consequence. He'd traded his freedom, his children, his future, for revenge. And sitting in his prison cell 20 years after that night at Walmart, Marcus still wasn't sure if it had been worth it. He'd gotten his revenge, yes. Angela and Daniel had paid the ultimate price for their betrayal. But the cost to Marcus, to his children, to his mother, to everyone who'd been caught in the blast radius of his rage, had been immeasurable. The truth was that there were no winners in this story. Everyone lost. Everyone suffered. Everyone paid a price far higher than any of them should have had to pay. And that's the truth about revenge. It doesn't heal anything. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring peace or closure or justice in any real sense. It just creates more pain, more loss, more devastation. Marcus Sullivan had learned that lesson, but he'd learned it too late, after the damage was done, after the bodies were buried, after his life and the lives of everyone he'd loved were irreparably destroyed. He had the rest of his life to think about that, to live with that knowledge in a 6-by-8-foot cell in the Indiana State Prison. And that was his real punishment. Not the bars or the guards or the loss of freedom, but the knowledge that he'd destroyed everything good in his life because he couldn't find a way to live with the pain of betrayal. That he'd chosen murder over healing, revenge over resilience, destruction over the difficult work of rebuilding. And he'd have to live with that choice every single day for the rest of his life. The end.